as we look forward to the season, we have Eric Eager, Pro Football Focus, and as I said, our very own Kyle Dvorchak joining us now. Guys, thanks so much for taking the time. Really what we want to do, and we're going to begin in the AFC, is break down teams we're fading, right? Maybe they're a little bit, how would I want to say, the value sucked out of them in the market. They have a lot of hype surrounding them, and that's where I'm going to begin with the Miami Dolphins. And I'll start with you here, Eric. I look at the Miami Dolphins, and their win total's 8.5. The over is juiced, and a lot of money over at PointsBet. 88% of the win total handle has come in on the over. They're plus 425 to make the division. The Tyreek Hill signing obviously got a lot of people hyped. Two is another discussion. Eric, take it away. What do you make of the Miami Dolphins?
Yeah, when I look at this team, it's sort of this classic example of, the end of the season, you have a certain record, right? 9-8. And, I think we're all positive about the direction of the franchise, 10-6 the year before. But you really have to take a closer look into how that 9-8 was constructed, because, a lot of people are going to look at that and say, oh, now this win total, we don't even need them to improve for this thing to go over. And I think you look at the actual composition of their wins. That they had an opening day win against the New England Patriots where they were outplayed, but got some turnover luck. Then they had 7 consecutive losses, and then after that, it was they got a nice spot on a Thursday night against the Baltimore Ravens, who had just played 5 quarters against the Vikings that previous Sunday, and then a bunch of quarterbacks who were not particularly good. So fundamentally, I think you have to ask, where were they last year? 6, maybe 6.5 wins, I believe is kind of maybe a decent estimate of where they were fundamentally. And then, okay, are they 2 or 3 wins improved? Does Tyreek Hill equal that? And I think most fans think that Tyreek Hill is worth full wins, but for the most part, I think bettors will tell you, and folks that do things like wins above replacement, he's more like half a win, right? So can he be worth that plus a little bit of a force multiplier on Tua? Can Tua improve? Because this team is going to have to improve, even in addition to the acquisitions they made, just to have the same record as last year. And I don't think, that the average bettor sort of thinks that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also think I like the Mike McDaniel hiring, right? I think it's a very good hiring in the ether. But the style of offense San Francisco played was sort of antithetical to what we know Tua does well. And Tua does it well in a way that is probably evidence of his limitations, but he's great on RPO and play action. And the San Francisco 49ers, they actually ran RPO at like half of the league average rate, and they ran play action at a slightly below average rate last year. So is he bringing a scheme that is good in theory to a team that cannot execute said scheme? I think so. And I'm concerned that he really tips his hand to, well, I know the Shanahan offense works. And we see that by him spending money on 3 running backs, one of whom he's already coached, and a fullback. Like, I think he's going to execute 49ers to a T, and I don't think Tua can do that as well as the average quarterback even.
It's all very fair points, and I don't mind kind of throwing a little bit of cold water on the Dolphins at this point, mostly because their schedule is somewhat fragile. There's a handful of pretty clear games that they ought to win that'll get them into that 6-7 win range. But then everything else, you basically need it all to break your way. You need them to win a bunch of coin flips to get you to 9, in my opinion. And realistically, the AFC East, they're gonna have to come up with wins against the Patriots realistically if they're gonna make the playoffs and hit that win total. So I don't mind being a little bit bearish on the chances of the Dolphins as we head into the season. A team that I'm surprised is on the fade list potentially, although this is maybe more about the way that the market is pricing this team, is the Kansas City Chiefs. Currently a relatively high total at 10.5, although that has not been a difficult milestone to reach in the Andy Reid, Pat Mahomes era. And I think, this maybe the bearishness speaks more to how competitive the AFC West is in general. I'll start with you, Kyle. Do you see any issues with the Chiefs in terms of just, maybe they don't have to go out there and give us their best every single week, all throughout the week? It's more important how they finish the season. And for those reasons, selling on them to start the season and finding a buy low in season makes more sense.
Yeah, I think it's even more so they don't have to, they probably don't have to give us, Andy Reid doesn't give us his best every week. He gives us his best like week 15 on or whatever. But when you have Patrick Mahomes, you don't have to give us your best every season, right? You can say, right now is not our window. We're going to not spend hundreds of millions of dollars on Tyreek Hill. We're going to send him off and build for the future. And I think if you were looking at this year, it's probably a losing bet. You want Tyreek Hill as opposed to not having Tyreek Hill. You don't want to try and replace him in the aggregate like they do in Moneyball with Mecole Hardman and Juju Smith-Schuster. And I love Sky Moore, but this second, a day 2 pick, right? but I think they're planning for they signed Patrick Mahomes like a decade-long deal. They're planning for a 5+ year window where the rest of their division is planning for like the next 2 years. So I think they're not even like the weakest team in their division, but the gap between them and their division came so much closer this year, and that's perfectly reasonable. I don't think it's an indictment of the team. It's just their views on planning for a 5+ year window.
Yeah, last year was Andy Reid's first year going under a season win total as a head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. That last year was 12.5. They missed with the loss of the Bengals in week 17. Kyle's right. Like when you look at scheme, sort of metrics, Andy Reid sort of gives his best when they play like Baltimore in week 3, Buffalo early in the season, and then it trails off as the season progresses. This year is going to be a little tricky. They have the hardest schedule in the NFL per our metrics. It's about a point harder per game than the average team on a neutral field. So that's going to be tough for them. However, and this is where I like your question, Drew, because they're sort of getting into that Belichickian Patriots sort of mode of we can go 2-2. There was a 1 year last year the Patriots won the Super Bowl. They lost to Jacksonville and Detroit in September, and they end up winning the Super Bowl. Like I think when you look at the way Kansas City finishes this year, they go at Broncos, at Texans, home to Seahawks, home to Broncos, and then at Raiders. That's probably the easiest stretch of football. If they can be 500 going into that, they're probably fine. And to Kyle's point, in the NFL, the last MVP to win the Super Bowl, last season-long MVP to win the Super Bowl is Kurt Warner in 1999. It's never about being the number one power-rated team or the favorite going into January. It's about, just being in there all the time and then letting sort of the combinatorics work out. And the fact that, when they won in 19, it was actually Baltimore's year to win the Super Bowl. And the 2 years they went in as the favorite, they didn't win the Super Bowl. So I think for them, they sort of understand that and they built a roster accordingly.
So let me ask you this, Eric, before I move on to the next team. I am curious, right? We look at this Kansas City team, what they did to their defense now with Tyrann Mathieu gone. We'll see. And we talk about, kind of maybe not their year. Wide receivers gone, Tyreek Hill out. We'll see what MVS does. I'm curious, how would you attack this team as the season progresses? Is there a way or time that you look at Kansas City and you're like, okay, I'm done fading them. Maybe I'll get involved in the futures market?
Yeah, I wouldn't bet on them early in the season. I mean, they're already laying a full field goal in Arizona against a team that won 11 games last year. Then they have to lay a full field goal at home to a Chargers team that I think we're all high on. They have Buffalo, they have Tampa early. I would probably, I wouldn't necessarily bet against them, but I would lay off of them. But you saw last season, they were the worst defense in the NFL the first 6 or 7 weeks of the year. And then during the middle of the season, Dallas led the league in scoring, and they held Dallas to 9 points. They had a bunch of games where their defense was really a catalyst for them. And even in the AFC title game, I thought their defense played better than their offense, especially in the second half of that game. So I think as the season progresses, when you have, 4 rookies in the defensive backfield, the guy that you're trusting to be your premier pass rusher as a rookie as well, and George Karlaftis, I think it's going to be slow to go. But I think halfway through the season, if history says anything, Steve Spagnuolo gets that team to play well on the defensive side of the ball in the second half of the year. So things like unders, things like, games where they win 24-3, to Kyle's point that, Andy Reid doesn't pull out everything, but they kind of win a game handily. Them being favored and under was a pretty solid play in the second half of last year.
Oh, I remember those games well. And that's I think they have kind of established a little bit of a blueprint we can read into in that regard. And I think realistically, someone else in the AFC West will probably race out to a lead in that division. We don't really know who it's going to be. It may be the Chargers, could be the Raiders for all we can tell you. But somebody could potentially put together winning football in September and October and have the a comfortable lead in the AFC West, at which point buying in on the Chiefs to win the West at a price like, say, 3-1 or 4-1 makes tons of sense to me. And then realistically, if it looks like they have to go on the road in the playoffs, they're still getting so much respect in the market game by game on the road. You're probably going to be looking at them at like pick 'em or under a field goal in every single one of their playoff games. So, getting involved at a futures price, if you can find anything to win the AFC in the, 8-1, 10-1 range, as we get into the kind of the meat towards the tail of the season, I think that would probably be your buy point. But, we're speculating a lot here, and, there's a lot of football to be played.
Yeah, and you talked about that last year. Same thing with the Chiefs, and it was a profitable way to get involved. Here's a team that I'm personally, and I'm going to talk about them for Edge of the Day. It's the Tennessee Titans that I want your opinion on. Kyle, I look at the Tennessee Titans, and I see Ryan Tannehill, who threw more interceptions last year than he did with his first 2 seasons combined with Tennessee. Derrick Henry, a phenomenal player. Can he stay healthy? There's some question marks around this team, and they're the second favorite to win their division. Their win total, I look at them, it seems high to me. Is this an overvalued team in the market? Will you fade the Tennessee Titans, or how will you attack them in the betting market as we get ready for the season?
Yeah, I think we might all agree on this. It sounds like you're on the under. I would be on the under. I mean, this team is at its best when it can jam play action, have Ryan Tannehill just bombing stuff to A.J. Brown, who's not with the team anymore, and they're trying to replace him with Robert Woods, and Treylon Burks, bless his heart, can't stay on the field in the middle of summer. So I think the best years of this team, and we've seen it in Tannehill's numbers, he joined the team and was maybe the most efficient quarterback in the league. And it comes down the next year, but still good. Then last year it comes down again. I think this team's best weeks, best seasons are probably behind them in the way they're formed right now.
Yeah, I think the hard part for an analytics guy like me is like what the value of Vrabel adds, because I think when you look at some of the decisions he makes, they punted the ball game away against the Ravens 2 years ago in the playoffs. Last season, Henry had like a plate in his foot and they run him 20 times in that game. I think it was hidden in the fact that Tannehill threw interceptions and Burrow was sacked 9 times. But like his usage was poor, in big games. But for the most part, like that team played the most players in NFL history last year, and they ended up getting a 1 seed in an AFC that is pretty tough, right? They beat the heck out of the Chiefs. They beat the Bills. This team there are intangible pieces that you want to buy into, but there just aren't enough tangible pieces anymore. On the defensive side of the ball, you have Landry, you have Simmons, you have Dupree are okay. Byard's a really good safety, but at the corner spot, there's a ton of question marks. Linebacker, Zach Cunningham is terrible for this division because he just bites on play action worse than anybody in the league. And then on the offensive line, they just don't have, in my opinion, the horses to support Derrick Henry, because Derrick Henry used to be a running back, in my opinion, that overcame everything. And I think now he's regressed. He's still elite, but he's regressed to the point where he needs help. And I don't think that the Titans are going to be able to give him that kind of help, either from run blocking, but also the threat of the pass, which I think is completely, gone with Corey Davis and A.J. Brown leaving over the last 2 years.
Okay, so let me ask for a price. Give me a market price for this then. The Titans go into this season with the mindset of, in order to do well and to win games like we did last couple of years, we need to get Derrick Henry the ball 25 times a game. Is that do you expect that is the way that they start the season, and how long can they stick with that before, all of a sudden they find that they're not winning games?
I mean, I think that's their mindset for sure. I mean, that's why you get rid of A.J. Brown. I mean, it's the classic. They paid Tannehill in many ways because he's a great quarterback for this situation, right? He doesn't try to do too much. He's really good with his legs. He's actually pretty good throwing the ball at the most efficient parts of the field, where are the middle, which are opened up by Henry. But, I mean, we've seen this before. This is a theorem about running backs. Like, after they get a lot of carries, after they get hurt, they're just not the same guy. And so even if I think they're going to be defiant in this space, I think that's ever more the reason to sort of back what Sara said at the beginning, which is this is just an under team. Even though the total is 2.5 wins underneath what they were last year, I still think it's a pretty solid play.
Yeah, I mean, how you can tell this team is going to go out and try and establish the run 25 plus times a game, maybe even the first half. Austin Hooper, a standout in minicamp. When Austin Hooper is your standout pass catcher in minicamp, you were coming out and Derrick Henry is getting it on first, second, third, maybe fourth down.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.